Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Nice to see you guys. I'm going to go ahead and start class on this next topic, which is practicing in a world of the unknowing, relationships with non-practitioners. This is where I'm going to help you to understand how to practice around people who aren't practicing the teachings, because it's very rare for somebody to be learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. So more likely than not, you've got plenty of people around you that aren't practicing the teachings of the Buddha. And even if there's people around you that are saying that they actually are Buddhist, they may not be studying with the original words of the Buddha. So what they're thinking about as Buddhism might be very different than what it is that you're studying as Buddhist teachings. So let me share with you guys about this topic of practicing in a world of the unknowing, relationships with non-practitioners. So first, let's talk about what a non-practitioner is, so you know what I'm describing here. What a non-practitioner is someone who's not actively learning and practicing the path to enlightenment as taught by the Buddha. The Buddha refers to this person as an untrained worldling. He talks about this in his teachings as well. This worldling, he refers to it because the person's holding on to the world, right? They haven't learned to let go. So he calls this person an untrained worldling. I don't suggest that you build this attitude of a us versus them mentality. That's really unwise. If we were to think with all kinds of conceit, like, look at us, we're practicing the teachings of the Buddha and other people aren't practicing the teachings of the Buddha. We're so much better than them. That's not what this talk is about. This talk is about helping you understand that there are people in the world who don't understand that they are causing their own anger. For example, you guys learned that if you studied the Four Noble Truths with me, that you're causing your own anger. Any frustration, agitation, for example, is being caused by your own mind. But there's other people who haven't studied those teachings and haven't seen that truth, where you can have your mom adamantly thinking that you're making her angry or frustrated, or your brother, your sister, or your life partner. They're adamantly thinking that you are causing them to be angry, and you know the truth that you're not, but they don't understand that. And you're not able to sit there and explain to them the Four Noble Truths as they're yelling and being bitter and harsh and hostile. So this non-practitioner that I'm describing here, while it's understandable to understand that there's some people in the world who are practicing the actual teachings of the Buddha and some who aren't, you shouldn't take this attitude of a us versus them mentality. You should see everybody as equal, but there is a difference in terms of people that you're talking to when they're not practicing the teachings. You will see a very big difference in the way that you can communicate and discuss things with them in terms of what their wisdom is and what they understand and what they know. So a non-practitioner is going to think about the world very differently than you. They're not going to understand the Four Noble Truths, as I was just talking about. I think we have a microphone on somewhere. If you guys wouldn't mind checking your mics. A non-practitioner isn't going to understand the Four Noble Truths. They're not going to understand that they're causing their own discontentedness. So when they're discontent, then they could potentially be blaming you for that. So they're not going to understand craving, desire, attachment in their own mind, and they're going to be constantly struggling with those feelings. And the more that you're choosing to do things your own way, and you're not trying to meet your family's expectations, they're going to become more and more discontent. And you're going to need to get comfortable with that, because as they have cravings and expectations of you, like we were talking about with true love, as your family and friends are putting expectations on you, and you're choosing not to do those things, they're going to get angry and upset. And if you didn't have it very clear in your own mind that they're causing their own discontentedness, you might just conform to their expectations. You might kind of shudder in the fear of, oh my goodness, they're going to get angry, or they're not going to give me money, or they're not going to give me sex, or they're not going to give me food, or whatever it is that you're reliant on these people for. If you have attachment to people and they're choosing to get angry and upset and frustrated, you might find it a real struggle in that situation. So one of the things to be sure you understand about non-practitioners is they are going to get angry. They are going to get frustrated. They are going to get agitated. But just understand that you aren't causing that. That's their own mind causing that. So as you choose to make your own wise decisions, don't be surprised when other people around you are getting discontent. But you can maintain your contentedness if you practice what I'm teaching you throughout this course. Because they are essentially going to have wrong view, right? A non-practitioner is going to have wrong view. They're going to see it as all these outside things are causing them to be angry. And what they're going to be trying to do is they're going to be trying to go out into the world and try to convince other people to do things their way. So if somebody's attached to you, or they're having craving, desire, attachment to you, and they're a non-practitioner, they're going to be trying to force you to do things their way. And because of their wrong view, they think the way to get to happiness is to force you to do things their way. That's what they think is the solution to their problem. And that's just because they haven't established right view. They think if I can get my brother to do this, or I can get my sister to do this, or I can get my mom or dad or my children to do this, then I will be happy. But they don't understand that that's wrong view. So you're going to need to be seeing this very clearly, that there's going to be people around you that have wrong view. And this is what a non-practitioner would be. Because there can even be people who are learning the teachings and they actually have wrong view, that they in their mind think that the way to solve their painful feelings is to put expectations on you. And this is what a non-practitioner is going to do. And that's because they're not understanding true love, what I was just talking about earlier. They don't understand to love somebody as they are is to not put your expectations on people. So this is what you're going to experience around non-practitioners. They may not be actively cultivating wholesome qualities in the mind, and they may not be eliminating unwholesome qualities. So again, this is what a non-practitioner is, or what the Buddha describes as an untrained worldling, that their mind is not trained and they're holding on to the world and wanting the world to be a certain way. But don't think about it as a us versus them mentality, but just understand that when you're talking to your parents and your friends and your family and your coworkers and your children and people who aren't practicing these teachings, they're going to be thinking about the world very differently than you. Don't even assume that because somebody considers themselves Buddhist, or just because they go to retreats and they live in temples and they do these different things, just because they're meditating, doesn't mean that they have right view, that they haven't necessarily established right view. They might not even be practicing the teachings that the Buddha actually taught, because some of these Buddhist centers in the world, they're doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. I have had a student come here one time, and they were here for the first time, and I just started getting to know them a little bit and asking them questions. And they said they've been Buddhist for 30 years. And I said, oh, really? Okay, interesting. And they said, yeah, I was a monk for 15 years. And I was like, oh, that's great. And because I'm interested in helping people, and I love all beings as they are, I was interested to see where they're at in their practice. So if they say they've been practicing the teachings for a long time, I will say, what causes anger? Because this is the very first question from the Four Noble Truths, that if somebody's deeply practicing the teachings and they've established right view, they would understand. So this person who says that they were Buddhist for 30 years and they were a monk for 15 years, I asked them what causes anger, and they said, oh, that's a very difficult question. I wouldn't be able to answer it. Right? And this is the very first thing that I teach students when they're first learning of what's causing your anger, which is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning. So just because somebody says they are Buddhist or they've been a Buddhist monk, you shouldn't assume that they're a practitioner, that they understand the teachings of the Buddha in the same way as you. They can still be potentially a non-practitioner. Like I mentioned, they could be going to retreats, they could be meditating, they could be reading books, they could be doing all these things, but they still don't have right view, which is their mind is causing their own discontentedness. So in these relationships where you're having friends or family or your parents or what have you, even if they consider themselves Buddhist, they still might not know that their mind is causing their own frustration. And they might be trying to convince you that you're the one who's making them angry, when in reality, it's their own mind. Okay, so any questions on what a non-practitioner is? No? Okay. So let's go further into this. Knowing the teachings and observing non-practitioners struggling, but yet they are uninterested to learn and practice the teachings on the path to enlightenment can be a real struggle for people, right? Like if you're practicing these teachings and you're learning the Four Noble Truths and your mind's becoming more and more and more peaceful and more joyful, but yet you see your mom struggling or your children struggling or your life partner struggling, this can be really hard for you, that you might feel like, gosh, I want to run in there and tell my brother everything to do about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and these things, because you see it's helping you. Because if you practice these teachings for any amount of time, you'll see that they're actually helping. I've had students in as early as 2 days start noticing improvements in their mind and in their life. And as you're practicing these teachings for 2 months and 2 years and further beyond, your mind's going to be getting more and more and more peaceful, but the people around you aren't, because they're not practicing the teachings. And this can be a real struggle for you, that as you see people around you getting angry and frustrated and agitated, you can see exactly why. You know it's their own craving, desire, attachment, but they might actually be blaming you for these things. So what you're going to need to do in this situation is eliminate your attachment to wanting people to practice the teachings, because you might be longing, yearning, and wanting others to practice the teachings. And when you see them struggling with problems, you might have painful feelings yourself. And you might think the solution to this is to rush in there and try to teach them a bunch of teachings. And this is just going to push them away. They're just going to reject what it is that you have to share with them, because it's your craving that's coming at them. You're longing, yearning, and wanting them to be a certain way. So you could purchase a book for someone and give it to them as a gift. You could say, hey, would you like help with that issue? And they might say yes. And then you say, hey, here's a video that could help you. Or here's a teacher that would be able to help you. Or they might say, no, I'm not interested in your advice, right? So there were times in my life where I would see my mom struggling, or I would see my sister struggling, and I would say, would you like help with that? And sometimes they would say yes, and then I would share some advice with them. And there were times where they would say, no, I'm not interested. And you need to be comfortable with that. If you have a craving, desire, attachment, when they say, no, I don't want your help, you'll have painful feelings. But if you can let go of your own attachment, which I'm going to teach you this afternoon in our class, how to eliminate attachment to the people close to you, then you can be completely content. There are even times when my mom would come to me and she would ask me for advice, and she would say, David, I need your advice. I've got this situation. Can you share that with me? And she would tell me the whole situation. I would spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour explaining to her how to solve this issue. And we would get to the end of our conversation and she would say, David, I think you're 100% correct, but I'm not going to do it that way. And I was like, all right, that's fine. Do it however you like. Right? And then she would go away. She would go do whatever she's going to do. She'd come back 6 months later and she'd say, David, it happened again. I didn't do what you said. It didn't work out. I should have did what you said. So they have to go out sometimes. They have to do that. They have to see that, hey, this is what you said. This is the wisdom that you're sharing. And they might do it completely opposite. And that's okay. Right? That's their own decision. That's that loving somebody as they are, connecting a little bit of that talk to this talk. That's loving someone as they are, that I didn't have an expectation that just because I shared an hour worth of content with my mom, that she's going to go out and do it my way, in the way that I was suggesting. No, she would like to do it her way. Go ahead. Go do it your way. But then when it blew up on her and it caused all kinds of problems in her life, she saw that and she realized that it was unwise. But that was her choice. That was her decision. So you're going to need to get comfortable with, sometimes you see people struggling, you offer them help and they say yes, and you share with them, and they might go out and do what you said, and they might have a great experience. Or they might go out and not do what you said, right? They might have said, yes, I would like your advice, but they go out and do something completely opposite of what you suggested. And you're going to need to be comfortable with that. Your willingness to help somebody shouldn't be contingent on they have to do it your way. Right? When somebody asks for your advice, that doesn't mean they're going to do it your way. If you're only sharing advice with this person because you have the expectation that they will do it your way, you're not practicing generosity yet. You're not practicing pure generosity, which is giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. So when you're practicing generosity to help your mom or your brother, your sister, or somebody else, it shouldn't be with the expectation that they will do it your way. So when I helped mom, I just helped mom. And if she did it a different way, up to her. That's her life. That's her choices. I didn't have the expectation that she would do it my way. So when she went out and did it a different way and it didn't work, that's the results of her decisions, right? So you'll need to get to that point where you're comfortable with people doing it differently, even if you spent an hour trying to help them and explain to them how to do it. And then in some cases, they're going to say, no, I don't want your advice. I'm not interested in your suggestions. And you're going to need to be comfortable with that. That doesn't mean they don't love you. And that doesn't mean they don't respect you. Sometimes we think that if somebody says, no, I'm not interested in your advice, that might mean that you think that they don't like you, or they don't love you, or they don't respect you, or they might think that you're a stupid person or something like this. That's not the case. They're just saying, hey, I'm not interested in your advice right now. Because the way that you've cultivated wisdom in your life is through your own direct experiences. And when you've went out in the world and you've experienced certain struggles, and then you cultivated wisdom of how to do it a better way, that's how you've cultivated wisdom in certain situations. So your friends and family, they're going to need to do that too. In some situations, they're going to be interested in your advice and interested in your guidance, and then you'll be able to share that with them. But in other situations, they're not interested in that. And that might mean that they go out into the world and they make some unwise decisions and they struggle. And if that's what they do, they're going to be cultivating wisdom through that struggle. So you're going to need to be comfortable with letting that struggle happen and that struggle occurring. When you have attachment to your mom or your dad or your brothers and sisters, you'll find that to be challenging. So when you live in a world of non-practitioners where people aren't practicing the teachings, you're going to need to get comfortable with them making unwise decisions and them struggling and you being okay with that. So you're going to need to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment to helping people, because the wiser you become, you're going to be able to see exactly the issues that people are having, and you're going to see exactly the solution, but they may not be interested in hearing your advice, and you're going to need to be comfortable with them struggling. But if you have a craving to help people, you will be upset when they won't take your advice. Okay, so everyone needs to approach the teachings on their own terms. You can't force people to practice these teachings. And even if you could, it just wouldn't work, because each person has to decide for themselves. There's 1,000,001 decisions that they have to make in order to make their way to enlightenment. Think about all the times you've come to classes, you've read books, you've meditated, all these 1,000,001 decisions that are going to lead to your enlightenment. Your friends and family have to be willing to make those decisions themselves. So if they're not willing to make the very first decision to watch that video or read that book or reach out to a teacher, if they're not willing to make that first decision, then you can't force somebody to get to enlightenment. So it's better for you to just restrain your mind and let them approach the teachings on their own terms, because the more you try to force them, the less interested they're going to be. Because when someone tries to force you to do something, what's the first thing you do? Dig your heels in, right? You dig your heels in. You're like, no way I'm going to do that thing. Even if it's like a really good idea, you're like, I'm not doing that. Just because they want me to do it, I'm not going to do it, right? You dig your heels in. So even if you have this great, wonderful idea of practicing the teachings and helping your family get to enlightenment, the more you try to force them to do it, the less interested they're going to be in doing it. They're just going to dig their heels in. Non-practitioners are going to have unwholesome moral conduct. They're going to practice wrong speech and wrong action. I taught you about what is right intention, right speech, right action on Monday. They're going to have moral conduct that's unwise. As you're learning about the moral conduct of the teachings of the Buddha, you're going to be making wiser and wiser decisions about your intentions, your speech, and your actions, but the people around you aren't going to have that. So you're going to need to eliminate any craving for other people to be a certain way. You're going to need to learn how to respond in situations rather than react. Sometimes when someone's being bitter, harsh, and hostile, if you have ego in your mind, you're going to think, oh, they're disrespecting me, right? And you might get really angry and frustrated about this. Well, if you understand the universal truth of non-self and that there is no me here, they're not disrespecting you because there's no you there. What's happening is they're having unwise moral conduct. They're conducting themselves in unwise ways. And now all you need to do is remain unaffected. But if you crave and desire for them to be a certain way, when they're conducting themselves through this wrong speech and wrong action, you're going to be really angry about this. So you're going to need to eliminate any craving, desire, attachment for people to be a certain way and respond in situations rather than react. And sometimes your response might be to just walk away from the situation. If you're noticing anger and hostility coming up in your mind, it's not a good idea to sit there and keep talking with this person. You're causing your own anger, and the best way to deal with that is to just walk away. calm down, and then come back and talk another time. It's better to be quietly frustrated in situations than overtly angry and hostile and bitter. Right? And you're going to notice this as you're training your mind more and more. You're going to go through this long period of time where you're quietly frustrated. Or maybe in the past where you would get angry and upset and frustrated, you might start yelling and hollering and being argumentative with people. You're going to need to restrain your mind because that's just causing harm in your relationships when you're putting that out. And now that's all going to come back to you. So if you were to yell and holler and scream at your parents or your brothers and sisters, if you were argumentative with them, they're just going to be that way with you too. So if you transform your mind where you can be quietly frustrated and you're not being argumentative and overtly hostile towards them, this is actually better. And if that means you need to walk away, then walk away. But ultimately, over time, as you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, you won't even be quietly frustrated anymore. There's just going to be nothing but peace and joy in there. So when someone's being bitter and hostile and harsh with you, you'll just have concern for their misfortune because you can see that they're causing all this anger themselves that you know that you're not causing it. So it's better to be quietly frustrated than overtly angry and hostile, because when you're putting out that anger and hostility, it's just going to come back to you. So if you can restrain your mind, that is best in situations where you're around non-practitioners, because they're going to be practicing wrong speech and wrong action and all these other things. You can choose to move on from a relationship while maintaining loving kindness and compassion for all beings. Understanding any discontentedness that you experience is a result of your own cravings, desires, attachments. So let me explain this to you. What you guys have heard me talk about is where you have painful feelings, and then you might think with wrong view that someone else is causing these painful feelings, and you might push this person away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. This is called aversion. This is what you're not interested in practicing. You're not interested in pushing people away and moving on from a relationship and thinking that that's going to solve the problem, because any painful feelings that you're experiencing is coming from your own mind. Pushing a person away or pushing a situation away, which is aversion, that's not going to solve the problem, because the craving is still in your mind, and it's just a matter of time before some other relationship, that same craving, desire, attachment is going to get triggered, and now you're going to have the same anger and the same frustration. So pushing people away doesn't actually solve the problem. But there are situations in certain relationships where it makes sense to move on from the relationship. And from the outside looking in, this can look very similar, that you're moving on from a relationship. But the difference is what's going on in your own mind, right? So the first scenario is that you experience painful feelings, you think this person is causing it, you push them away and you try to move on and think that that solves the problem. And you're thinking that they are the problem, and if I push them away, this is going to solve it. Let me move on. This isn't what you're interested in. This is having wrong view. But there are some relationships where you're bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative. They're bitter, harsh, and hostile and argumentative. There's too much difficulties in the relationship. You're not committed to it. And it's better to just move on. And that's the best way for you to clean up this particular aspect of your life. And you can do that while maintaining right view. You can realize that, hey, there's too much hostility in this relationship. I'm too attached. I'm not really committed to the relationship. Let me move on and just move on from the relationship, but I can still love this person. I can still have this genuine interest in seeing them be well. And one of the best things you could potentially do for yourself or for the other person is to choose to move on. And there are certain relationships that you might need to do that with. And you can maintain this genuine interest in seeing them be well, learning how to love them from afar, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be in a relationship with them, because if you just hold on to this relationship, it might actually be problematic for you and for them, because there's just more bitterness and hostility and you guys can't work out the relationship. So in some situations, you might just need to move on, but just realize any painful feelings that you're experiencing because of it, it's coming from your own cravings, desires, attachments. It's not the other person that's causing that. So you can still move on from relationships and actually clean this up. So there's certain relationships that you're going to need to move on from. This is one category of relationships. This is one of the ways you're going to be able to clean up your relationships. It's just move on. You're not committed. They're not committed. There's too much issues in their lives together, and it's just better to let go and move on. right? And then there's a second category of relationships of people you're more committed to, and you really would like to see this relationship survive and do well, and you're committed to improving it, and they're committed to improving it. So maybe you need to kind of put this relationship on pause and just kind of step away a little bit, train your own mind, gain some more wisdom, do the meditation, do the loving kindness meditation, and then at some point you might come back into the relationship, and now you guys have a better opportunity to work things out. And then there's a third category of relationships on your journey to enlightenment, which are completely new relationships that you don't even have right now. You don't even know the names of these people. You haven't met them yet. There's going to be new people in your life from this point forward that you're going to end up meeting. And those people you'll only ever be loving and kind with. So that means in those relationships, there'll only be loving kindness coming back to you. So in this life and in this journey to enlightenment, you're going to need to clean up your relationships, because an enlightened being doesn't have hostile and bitter and harsh relationships. They can be loving and kind in all their relationships. All their relationships are at ease. So some of these relationships you're going to need to let go of and move on from. Some of them you're committed to. You need to do some work. You need to step away, do that work, and come back together. And then there's going to be new people that are brand new people you haven't even met with. You're only ever going to be loving and kind to them, and that's the only thing that'll come back to you. So these are the types of relationships that you might have. So like there's ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, and people like this that I've had to let go of and move on from. It just wasn't working out. But then there's people like my wife, my mom, people like this that I was more committed to, and I needed to work those relationships out. My sister, people like this. And now I've done the work on my own mind, and I was able to enter back into those relationships and sort this out. And then there's new relationships, people like you. You've only ever seen me be loving and kind. You didn't know me in the past when I was angry and harsh and upset and had all these cravings, right? You didn't know me then. So that's why here I only ever experienced love and kindness and respect, because that's what I'm giving out. But there's people in my past that long ago I was bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative with, but I had to let those relationships go. And then the recurrent relationships, I decided to work on those and improve those. But then there's all these new relationships that I'm forming and creating, and I'm only ever loving and kind in those relationships. So that's how you clean this up. Okay. Eliminating craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations that all beings need to learn and practice the teachings, because you can't force people to practice these teachings. So in terms of non-practitioners, you're going to need to get used to people not practicing the teachings. My sister doesn't practice the teachings. She just doesn't. And she has struggles from time to time, and I hear about those struggles, and I'm like, yeah, the Buddha's teachings would help her, but that's what she chooses to do, right? She chooses to do those things. Or there might be other people that I see that aren't practicing the teachings. Between me and them, everything's wonderful. But them and other people, they might have all kinds of issues or all kinds of difficulties. And you're just going to need to get comfortable with that. If someone's choosing not to practice these teachings, they're going to continue to struggle and have difficulties over and over and over again. The teachings of the Buddha are true. They're actually work. You can see, you can completely transform your mind and completely transform your life. But if other people aren't choosing to practice these, that's their decision. They're choosing to stay in that discontentedness. They're choosing to be angry. They're choosing to be frustrated. They're choosing to be sad. There's choices that they're making. And if that's the choice they're making, then you just accept their choice. That's the choice they're making. All right. You're going to need to train the mind to be comfortable with accepting other people's choices and decisions, that their decisions are not going to match your decisions and expectations. What you decide for your life is going to be very different than what other people decide for their life. So if you crave for other people to do things your way, this is going to be problematic for you. I'll give you an example from my life. In the past, when I would have a new movie that I would see come out in the theater, I would go to my wife and I would say, hey, let's go to this movie. I want you to go to this movie. Do you want to come to this movie with me? And sometimes she would say, no, I don't want to come. And I'd be like, oh, come on, you party pooper. Like, why don't you want to come? You know, I'd put all this pressure on her, trying to get her to come, because I had this expectation of wanting her to come with me to this movie. And then, of course, there was an argument. Sometimes she would just relent, right? And she would come. But then she's grumpy the whole time, right? Because she didn't really want to come anyway. And then I'm grumpy because she's grumpy, and I don't, all this whole problem, right? This was what we did in the past. Well, when you train your mind and you realize that other people's decisions are going to be different than yours, and that's okay. Now, if I go to my wife and I say, hey, honey, I would like to take you on a date. That's what I usually say. Even now, me and my son will go to her and say, Mom, we want to take you on a date. She's like, really? Like, yeah, how about this movie? We'd like to take you to this movie. And sometimes she says yes, but sometimes she says no. So now when she says no, we just say, okay, well, enjoy your day. We'll see you when we get back. Right? Where before we might have put our expectations on it. We might have thought that this is the love because she doesn't want to come with us. She doesn't love us. She doesn't want to be with us. But that's just your mind telling you that story. If you have a craving, desire, attachment, and you want this person to come, and you think them coming means that they love you, then you might tell yourself that this person doesn't love you. When in reality, she's just interested in relaxing at home. Maybe she had a lot of work that she's been doing the last few days, and she'd like to just relax at home. So if mom gets what she would like, and then we get to go do what we like, everybody's peaceful, everybody's joyful. But when we start trying to put our expectations on each other and force each other to do things, that's where the disgruntledness and the grumpiness comes in. So now we don't do that in our family. In our family, if mom says she's not interested in coming, then she's not interested in coming. If she says she's going to come, then she comes, because she's not always going to say yes. That's the impermanent nature of decisions. So if you have a craving for other people to do things your way, then when they don't do it that way, you'll be angry or frustrated. You might think they don't love you or they don't respect you, when in reality, it's just impermanence. It's just impermanence that people are going to make different decisions different ways. So you're going to need to be comfortable with accepting people's decisions, even if that means they're going to struggle, even if that means they're going to have all kinds of difficulties. You're going to need to accept their decisions as they are. That's part of loving beings as they are and being around non-practitioners. They're not going to always see that they're walking off a cliff. They're not going to see that because they don't have the wisdom to realize they're walking off the cliff. And of course, if they're walking off a real cliff, you would try to help pull them back, but they're walking off the figurative cliff, and now they're going to struggle and they're going to have difficulties, and that's part of them growing and developing wisdom, and that's how you developed wisdom. So sometimes you're going to need to just let them walk off the figurative cliff, right? The problem isn't that other people are not practicing the teachings. Instead, the mind wants and expects others to practice the teaching. So as you're learning and practicing, you might want other people to practice these teachings, and that's the problem that you're experiencing. So getting rid of that will help you. Understanding that you can disagree with others' intention, speech, and actions while still choosing to remain peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. That if you can only be peaceful if other people do things your way, then you're not going to be able to be peaceful all the time, because there's not anyone that's going to do things your way. It's only you. So when other people are making different decisions, just accept it, right? Mom wants to stay home. She's not interested in going to the movies. Okay, great. Enjoy. Have a good time at home, right? We're going to head out. Mom, would you like to come to the restaurant? No. Okay, enjoy. We're going to head out to the restaurant. See you later. But if you have a craving, you're going to not be able to maintain your peacefulness when they're choosing to stay home. Understand you can disagree with others' intention, speech, and actions while still maintaining loving kindness and compassion, not wanting others to say or do the same things as you. Loving kindness is the genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. Compassion is the concern for their misfortune. So just because you're allowing other people the space and freedom to make their own decisions doesn't mean you don't love them. If my son is walking off the figurative cliff, for example, and I choose not to stop him, that doesn't mean I don't love him. Sometimes that can be one of the most loving things you could do, is let somebody make some decisions, experience the consequences and the struggles and difficulties with that, and now he's going to learn from that. There was a time where my son had this craving to sit in the back of the truck. My wife has a truck, and I would drive it from time to time. And there was a time where he just wanted to sit in the back of the truck. He was like 8 years old, and he just kept wanting to sit in the back of the truck. And I knew it was unwise for him to be back there without an adult, because there was a period of time where there was a bunch of adults sitting back there, and he really enjoyed it. And then when that event was over, he kept asking me, even when we drove together, just him and I, he was like, "Dad, can I sit in the back?" And I would say, No, you can't sit in the back. You're only 8 years old. No, you can't sit back there. But he kept asking. So I knew he had a craving. And one of the ways to eliminate a craving is sometimes you need to fulfill it. You need to actually do it. So I knew that in order for him to extinguish this craving, he was going to have to actually do it. So one day he was like, "Hey, Dad, can I sit in the back of the truck?" And I looked up at the sky and I saw it was about to rain. And I was like, "Sure, you can sit in the back of the truck." And he sat in the back of the truck, and we're driving down the road. before you got in the back of the truck, I said, by the way, if it starts raining, Dad's not going to pull over and let you get in the truck. So I was driving down the road and I saw the clouds. He didn't understand the weather systems. He didn't understand how to tell whether it was going to rain or not, but I did. So we were driving down the road and it starts raining, it starts drizzling a little bit, and he starts knocking on the window, knock, 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 knock. And I just kept on driving. He's knock, 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 knock. And I just kept on driving. He's like, knock, 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 knock. And then finally we got to a stoplight where there was a stoplight. And I knew he was going to try to come to the front. So I pulled up and I got really close to the car next to me because I knew he was going to need to get out. And the motorbike's whizzing in between the spaces. At 8 years old, I knew he wasn't going to be able to get out and easily come into the front. So I pulled a little bit close to the car next to me so that motorbikes couldn't get through. And then when we stopped at the red light, he's like, knock, 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 knock. Can I come up front? Can I come up front? I was like, sure, you can come up front. So he was able to get out of the truck and then come over and get in. So I did this in a way that was safe. Right? I knew that he wasn't going to die in this situation. I created an environment where he could extinguish this craving. And that's exactly what happened. Since that point in time, he still enjoys sitting in the truck every once in a while, but he only does it every once in a while. He doesn't have this craving where he kept really wanting me to allow him to sit in the back. So now he's almost 12 years old, so he can make the choice on his own whether to sit in the back. And now he usually only does it when other people are sitting back there as well. But that's his decision. Even if now he said he would like to sit in the back of the truck by himself, sure, go ahead, sit in the back of the truck. But at 8 years old, I needed to kind of guide him a little bit and help him extinguish this craving, desire, attachment. So you can have loving kindness and compassion for people, which is this genuine interest in seeing them be well and be comfortable with their decisions and letting them make their own decisions. And sometimes they need to experience what it means to sit in the back of the truck and get that rain and realize that, yeah, this is an unwise decision. I probably shouldn't sit back here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just end this part by just opening up to any questions that you guys have and any struggles that you're having. If there's certain relationships that you're in with non-practitioners and you're curious about how to improve this, you can ask me those kinds of questions. So this is just like a free-form questions. I just gave you a little bit of detail on practicing with non-practitioners, but now where the real benefit is going to come is from you guys asking questions about certain relationships that you're in, and then I can help you with that. So those of you guys here, if you'd like to use the mics, those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So I don't know who's first or who's second, but I know a lot of you guys have microphones. So I'll let you guys go forward.
So my first question is, if you are experiencing anger towards another person and you're not able to walk away, wouldn't it make sense to communicate to that person that you are experiencing anger?
What kind of situation can't you walk away from? You mean like if you're in a car or something?
Well, let's imagine what happened to me. I was staying at a friend's house, and she said that I would like you to move on tomorrow.
I'd like you to move out tomorrow?
Yeah, leave.
Okay.
Go. And I said, well, that's okay, of course. I mean, obviously. But I felt quite upset. Mm-hmm. And so I communicated that to her, and we talked about it. And in the end, I feel like it made the connection, well, stronger, better.
Mm-hmm. So what I would have done in that situation is I would have just walked away, went to your room, and just been quiet. No need to stay in that situation, because oftentimes when the mind is angry, it'll have difficulties being restrained. You'll have difficulties restraining your mind because your mind's already uncontrolled at that point. When the mind is experiencing any discontent feeling, it's because the mind's undisciplined. So oftentimes when you stay in the situation when you're angry, it's going to only be a matter of time before the mind blah, 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 and it does something. So it's best to just walk away and remove the mind from the situation, because what's happening is the mind's experiencing contact through the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. These are called the 6 sense bases. And when you experience contact based on your cravings and desires and attachments, you're going to see that contact is either agreeable or disagreeable. And when something's agreeable to you, you'll get the pleasant feelings. But when it's disagreeable, that's where the painful feelings come in. So if you're in a situation where you're experiencing contact through the eyes or the ears, in this case was the ears, you heard hey, I want you to move out, right? This was disagreeable to you because you had a certain craving in there. And now this anger is arising. The best thing to do is remove the mind out of the situation so that it can't keep taking in this contact. So that way you can calm the mind down. Because telling the other person that you're angry isn't going to actually solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is you got to eliminate your craving, your desire, your attachment. And as long as you've got the contact coming in through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, then it's hard to train the mind to let go. So what the Buddha teaches you is to distance yourself from the object and then train your mind to eliminate this attachment. So in this situation, I wouldn't say that you did something wrong or you did something right or something like that. But my advice to somebody is when they've noticed the anger, the frustration coming up, is to remove themselves out of the situation to allow the mind to calm down. And then if it's a few hours later or a few days later that you can talk to this person, then talk to this person. But in the moment when your mind's angry, it's better to be quietly angry on your own, where you can't be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intention, speech, and actions. Because if you become unskillful in your intention, speech, and actions, you're just going to create unwholesome karma that you're going to have to deal with. So by removing yourself out of the situation, you don't give the mind the opportunity to become unskillful through your intention, speech, and actions.
My question is, I have a very good relationship with my family, but after this discussion, it's clear that I've placed a lot of expectations on some of them explicitly. And so my first instinct is to just call them and apologize. But I think if I do that, isn't that just me giving into my own craving to want some kind of forgiveness or to absolve myself from the damage that it's not damage because I know it's them interpreting it their way, so they're stressing themselves out. But you know what I mean? Like adding pollution to the system.
Yeah. Sometimes when you're learning these teachings and you look back at your life and you see how you made so many unwise decisions, there can be like this overwhelming emotion sometimes, or this urge to go kind of fix things and realizing that, wow, I've done things so unwisely. This is actually a good thing that the mind is realizing, like, wow, I got some real change that I need to do. I need to do things differently. In some situations, it might make sense for you to apologize to people because it can be an acknowledgement that, hey, I need to do things better, and it can kind of feel better for your own mind to like release this. But at the same time, you're not interested in setting any kind of new expectation on their side that somehow you're going to be perfect from this point forward, because that's not going to be the way that it happens. Because even though your mind sitting here in the classroom in the temple can intellectually understand you've made some unwise decisions, once things start happening in your life, the idea of you like instantly not putting expectations on your family anymore, this probably isn't going to happen. Although you would like to aim to work in that direction, you're going to probably be in situations where you're struggling, and you might notice halfway through that, oh my goodness, I'm putting expectations on this person. I shouldn't be doing this. So if you are going to apologize, if you would like to do that, up to you. I wouldn't tell you yes to do it or no not to do it. Just realize that you're not interested in leaving the conversation with the expectation that you're going to be perfect from that point forward. You can acknowledge like, hey, I've made some unwise decisions and I'm really sorry about this. I'm aiming to do better. And any of that stuff that I told you to do and I put expectations, just forget I ever said it to you. And I really apologize. And I'm working to do better. And this doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect from this point forward, but I'm working on it. And I realize that I've been unwise to put my expectations on you. And I'm so sorry about that. So you can do that kind of thing, but leave behind the sentiment that, hey, I'm still a work in progress here.
Maybe you have some guidance on how to get comfortable with the lack of genuine connections with other people. Just how to deal with it. I think I have some attachment in, it's not really expectation, I just have an attachment to finding a person in my life that just have a genuine connection with me. Yeah, I think it's not an attachment, but it's very present. It's always that kind of like, it's not a seeking, it's almost like I know it's not happening, and it's just, So to deal with this.
Okay. So the idea of this genuine connection, oftentimes what the mind is looking for is a craving, desire, attachment. It's just another word for craving, desire, attachment, that the mind is wanting this person to do a certain thing. And when they do those things, now you'll consider this is a genuine connection because they're doing these sets of things that I've set out in my mind, that these are the things someone does when there's a genuine connection. So if you get rid of those expectations of wanting someone to be a certain way and having kind of this ideal thought of what a genuine connection would look like, then you can see that you can have a relationship with anybody and everybody. Like I have relationships with all of you guys. Some of you I spend more time with than others. Some of you it's just here in class. Some of you I spend time with outside of class. We have social events and things like this. But either way, it's a relationship, and I don't have any expectation that that relationship should be any certain way. So it's a wonderful relationship with everybody. But if I had an expectation of these things need to occur in order for it to be a genuine connection, then there's only certain relationships that would conform to that. So you got to get rid of that expectation, that idea of a genuine connection, and just be like, hey, I'm just going to have relationships with people and spend time with a conversation or going to have dinner or movies, but without any expectation of how that should or shouldn't go. And then that way you can feel comfortable with everybody around you. So if we peer into this a little bit more, I should have did this at the beginning. What do you think is a genuine connection? How do you define a genuine connection?
Just a connection with somebody that is just a companionship, somebody that is not hostile, not anything like this, and just a relationship when there is appreciation between two people with the understanding of, I guess with a little bit of understanding of the teaching of the Buddha, actually, just understanding with the loving kindness and that kind of thing, not having people having expectation on what I'm going to do for them, and just giving the love without expecting that there is anything I got to do to receive love as well.
How will you know when this genuine connection has been established? What are the indicators for you?
I think that it's almost like a feeling of seeing that the other person doesn't have expectation or don't seem to attach too much to the way I behave or what I'm going to do. Oh, you didn't text back that day. Why are you like this? Why can't you communicate every day? And I'm like, because I didn't feel like this that day.
So do you expect them to not have expectations of you?
Yes, I do.
Do you see the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to get rid of that.
Okay.
And realize that there's all these non-practitioners in the world, and while you can function with non-attachment, other people are going to get attached. But as you get deeper and deeper into your practice, there's ways to practice where you ensure people don't get attached to you. So what you're doing with the text messages, like when you're forming new relationships, it's good that when they send you a text message that you don't reply right away, that you wait several hours or even a day or two. Because if early on in the relationship, if you're constantly replying back and forth to people, you're allowing their mind to get attached to you. And now the relationship's going to end in discontentedness. Any relationship that has an attachment, it's sabotaging the relationship. So you'll get really good at identifying your own attachments, but you also get really good at observing when other people are starting to get attached to you. And there are certain decisions that you can make about how you navigate the world to make sure that you don't provide the opportunity for people to get attached to you. There's all kinds of ways, depending on like whether it's text messages or phone calls. Like even when people call you, sometimes don't answer it right away. Even though you're sitting there and you could easily answer it, just let it go to voicemail or what have you, and call them back in 3 or 4 hours, or even the next day or 2 or 3 days later. Because then you're helping their mind to realize that you're not permanent in their life, because they might be having a craving to talk to you. And if you fulfill that craving, it just allows their mind to grab on. So what you would like to do is introduce some impermanence into the relationship so that they have an opportunity to not get attached. So sometimes don't answer phone calls, don't reply to text messages. And as you do this at the beginning of the relationship and you're ensuring that they're not getting attached, then ultimately you might be able to get to the point where, yeah, you pick up the phone and you answer it and no big deal. But early on in the relationship, you're not interested in establishing every time you call me, I am going to answer. And every time you text message me, I'm going to reply back to you, because that's just allowing their mind to grab on. So there's simple things like this that you can do to ensure people don't get attached to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
It was
you're
helpful.
welcome. Mhm. Frank, did you have a question?
So building onto this idea of a genuine connection, I mean, I get that it's an attachment to a certain maybe list of criteria, right? Like when I get this, then I would feel that connection. Then I will feel that like genuine, like whatever that feeling is. So I get that that's an attachment to wanting things to be a certain way. Now, having said that, I mean, there are certain people in my life, certain friends that I do feel more at home with, right? Not that they have to be that way, like if they tomorrow said, Frank, actually, friendship over, I'd be like, that sucks. Okay. And I'd move on, right? So it's not necessarily that it's like, no, you need to be my friend. But I'm starting to think more about like, why is it then that there are certain people that I naturally have an easier and more trusting connection with? And I'm not sure if the answer is that they also share in my values, or if they also share in like certain wholesome values that then allow me from a place of wisdom to be more open and trusting and more genuine.
Yeah. So people who are into wholesome things will tend to attract people who are also into wholesome things, and you will appreciate being around those types of people. Where if you're into unwholesome things, you're going to tend to attract people of that type, and you're going to appreciate being around other unwholesome people. And now people are doing things either unwholesome or wholesomely. So that's why the Buddha teaches to pay a lot of attention to who you choose to associate with. And this is one of the classes in this course where I'm going to teach you how to make wise decisions about who to include in your life without judging people and without looking down on them. So the people that you're appreciating being around are probably doing wholesome things and making wise choices in their life. And you enjoy when people are polite and kind and friendly and respectful and things like this. And that's what all relationships need in order to be successful, is politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. Right? And that's what you're going to hear me talk about when we talk about building relationships, is that there needs to be politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. When you expect those things in your relationships, that's where you're sabotaging the relationship. Because the only type of person that can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful all the time, 100% of the time, is an enlightened being, right? You're going to have people in your life who are sometimes disrespectful or sometimes impolite or sometimes unkind. And if your criteria is that I can only be friends with someone who's polite, kind, friendly, respectful 100% of the time, then you can only be friends with enlightened beings. And there's very few of those in the world right now. And you might not even know how to determine who is enlightened and who's not. So you're going to encounter situations where your family or friends are disrespectful or unkind or unfriendly. And you just got to look at that and decide, talk about this when we get to that point, does it make sense for me to go forward in this relationship or not? So it's a matter of looking for politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect, and knowing that that's what you need to have a successful relationship without expecting it. The expectation is the longing, yearning, and wanting. And now, when they're polite, kind, friendly, respectful, you're happy. But then when they're not, when they're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, you're angry and you're frustrated and you're bitter and you're harsh. That's because that's a craving, desire, attachment. So it's a matter of knowing what is successful and what you need in a relationship, and not expecting it or wanting it and craving for it, but just making wise decisions to ensure your relationships have these things. And the more that you practice these things, the more the people around you will as well. As you're polite, kind, friendly, respectful, you're practicing the Eightfold Path, you'll notice more and more people around you will practice in that way.
And then further to that, I mean, so if we're eliminating our cravings, desires, and attachments, and we're kind of quote unquote redefining what a romantic relationship is, and I haven't thought this out yet, but I'm thinking about, well, okay, so like everyone, so coming from a place of I love everyone, right? I want them from a place of non-attachment to be in a state of well-being, health, and success, and all that good stuff. And then in the past, I would differentiate someone who's a friend versus someone who's a potential romantic partner by attraction, right? Mm-hmm. Which I'm like, wait, is that just another craving, desire, attachment? Like where, so how do we differentiate? Is it possible to have an attraction to someone that is not a craving, desire, attachment from a physical perspective?
Nope. There's an attachment there. There's a craving, desire, attachment. So that's why when we were talking earlier that I was mentioning someone doesn't get to enlightenment and then decide to have a life partner, that if they're going to have a life partner, they've done that on their way to enlightenment. Because anytime you're involved in a romantic relationship where there's sexual contact and things like this, there is craving, desire, attachment. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't necessarily do that, but it's just that you can't have sex without craving, desire, attachment. There's a craving, desire, attachment there. And in terms of selecting a partner, there's going to be some cravings, desires, attachments there. And that's why someone will do that on their way to enlightenment. But by the time they get to enlightenment, they've extinguished all their cravings, desires, attachments, but they might still have a life partner at that point. But at that point, they don't have craving in their relationship. They don't have this longing, yearning, and wanting their partner to be a certain way. So if you have a partner and you're having sex, there is craving, desire, attachment. And that's why there's arguments, and that's why there's frustration and these kinds of things. You can get to that second stage of enlightenment that we talk about and still be having sexual relationship, and you guys can have a very peaceful life. Let's just say both of you guys were in the second stage of enlightenment. Your life will be quite peaceful, but you're still going to be experiencing discontentedness from time to time because of your attachments in this situation. It's not until you get to the third stage of enlightenment that the mind has eliminated all sensual desire, and that's the point where you won't experience any discontentedness related to things like sexual contact and your life partner and things like this. You're going to still experience some minor discontentedness, like maybe once every 3 months, once every 6 months, you just feel a little bit icky, a little bit off. But those are just little minor craving, desire, attachments by that point in the third stage. And of course, the fourth stage, there's no cravings at all. There's no discontentedness whatsoever because it's been completely extinguished. So if you're in a relationship and your mind is unenlightened, there's going to be craving, desires, attachments. And that's what draws us to each other. But then once you come together, if you learn true love, you can support each other, encourage each other, develop a wonderful relationship with each other, particularly if you guys are both practicing the teachings. And then ultimately at some point, you guys will decide, okay, we're done with the sexual stuff. And then you move on, and then both of you guys will be able to get to peace and joy in your life and in your relationship. But as long as there's sexual contact, there is attachment and there is going to be discontentedness.
Okay. So the phrase like, she's good on paper, he's good on paper, but you don't really feel the spark is pretty much exactly what we're talking about, right? Like this idea of spark is that craving, desire, attachment.
Yep.
That kind of comes and goes and it's purely conditional.
Yep.
So I should go for the girl who looks good on paper? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you're interested in a relationship with a woman, you're going to need to make a selection. I'll give you that guidance when we get to that class about how to make a wise choice about your life partner and friends and people like this. But what criteria you use is up to you, right? You're going to need to feel comfortable with this person. But I'm going to teach you some criteria that you might consider in selecting a life partner, because the decision you make is very important, it's very impactful. If you have a life partner that's gambling, that's using drugs and alcohol, that's having sexual misconduct, that's lying or stealing or things like this, you're going to have all kinds of difficulties. And that's what the dating process is. Here in Thailand, they call it learning each other. They don't call it a dating process. They call it learning each other. So I'll teach you guys about this learning period where you learn each other and you learn like, hey, you start to see all their cravings, desires, attachments. Can I deal with this? Because together in your journey as life partners, you can support and encourage each other to become better and better people. That's essentially what a life partnership is that you're there to support and encourage each other in your life journey with each other. But when you have wants and expectations, and if you think your love is, wow, she's got such amazing hair, she's got such an amazing shape, she's got such amazing skin, all that stuff is impermanent. And when all that stuff starts changing, you might think your love is gone, when in reality, it's just your craving isn't getting fulfilled. And that's where you might get to a certain age and say, oh, I need to get a new model. I need to get the latest model. I need to get the 20 or 30-year-old, because now maybe you're 40, 50, 60 years old. And now this person doesn't look as appealing to you anymore. And if all you're looking for is getting your cravings fulfilled, then that might be where you go to a younger person and think that that's going to solve your problem, when in reality, it's just the mind's craving this person to be permanently beautiful, when we're all going to age. We all are experiencing impermanence. So when you see the love is that genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, and you're there to support and encourage this person in life, and you're not looking to the physical appearance, for example, or the pedigree, the paper, because those things are all going to change. And if that's what you think of as that's what makes our relationship so great, is that she's so beautiful and she's got all these credentials and she's got all this money and all these other things, then when things start changing, you're not going to be able to maintain the relationship. So like when my wife met me, I had lots of money because I was in business. I had lots and lots of money. And if that was her love and that's what she was after with me, now that I'm doing this and I don't have money, our relationship would have fell apart. But that's not what she was interested in. She was interested in the person. So now that I don't have money, we still have our love because she didn't define our love through the money. And same thing with me. I didn't define the cooking, the cleaning, the certain appearance that she had. I didn't define that as our love or the sex. So now when all those things are gone, we can still maintain our love because we have a genuine interest in seeing each other be well. So while you might be attracted to those things that's on the pedigree or the paper, that might be what initially attracts you to the person. You need to figure out this true love and maintain that. And that's what's going to create the sustaining life partnership. Doesn't mean you don't go for the woman you think is the most beautiful or whatever. You can surely do those things, but don't get attached to them. Don't get attached to them because they're all going to change. She's not going to look like that permanently. Right?
Perfect. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm a teacher and I work with elementary kids. They're non-practitioners, but many of them seem to have this wisdom, this kindness, these things that we are talking today. And I was wondering if they were born with this or they acquired this at home from parents.
Yeah, so the teachings of the Buddha, it's what I refer to as the natural laws of existence. And these natural laws have been tapped into by different people at different times. So this is why you can look at the Buddha's teachings and Jesus Christ's teachings, for example, and you can see a lot of similarities. Or even Prophet Muhammad's teachings, you can see certain similarities. That's because they're the natural laws. And we learn these natural laws at different times from different people. In my opinion, the Buddha has the most complete, most comprehensive package. And it's like, here it is. This is exactly the way to live a better life. And if you learn and practice this, you'll experience the enlightened mind. But, you know, grandma's got a little bit of those teachings, and grandpa and mom and dad and mentors and bosses and teachers have a little bit of this wisdom sprinkled throughout the world. So as a human being in the world, you learn a little bit from grandma and grandpa. You learn a little bit from mom and dad or aunts and uncles and people like this. And as an individual, you have certain wisdom that has helped you in life. But then if you're unenlightened, there are certain things that are unwise that you're currently doing. So you can have individuals that learn in this life a little bit of the natural laws from here and there without even realizing that's what it is. Because we learn to not steal and not have sexual misconduct and not lie and not take intoxicants. We learn these kinds of things growing up, but we don't necessarily understand the cause and effect and the action and result. And that's why we might end up going to do those things. It's like, yeah, mom doesn't want me drinking alcohol, but I'm going to go do it anyway. Or, you know, mom and dad talk about not lying, but I'm going to do it anyway. And now you see the results that it produces. So the Buddha gives you this complete package to be able to see, like, this is all the natural laws. This is exactly what will lead to this enlightened mind, but you can pick it up here and there from different people. You can also have it from your previous lives. If you've studied the teachings in the previous lives, that wisdom will come into your new mind, and people can kind of have a bit of that wisdom in this life from that as well. So a combination of these things. Children can sometimes be kind of almost predisposed to certain wisdom that they've learned growing up. But then when you actively get on the path, like what some of you guys are choosing to do, that's where your wisdom really increases, because you're actively reading, you're actively coming to classes, you're meditating, you're watching videos, podcasts, you're getting help from your teacher, all these kinds of things. That's where, whoa, you can make some big steps forward in your life, and you can see that it's working. So you can get this trickle effect of learning throughout your life, but it will never really amount to enlightenment until you actively get on the path and you truly learn all the complete package of the natural laws of existence. Mm-hmm. Leo, you have a question? Some others? Yeah, I don't know who's first, who's second. You guys do whatever you like.
I remember a time when I felt more self-confident, especially one time, and I was more motivated to do tasks by my own or do it. And I remember when sometimes I went home to my family. When I met my big brother, he's normally a person who does things he has very much effort to take the lead and people are following him. And I also like to do that more, like trying things out. Someone asked, hey, who wants to do that? And I was like, yeah, I can do that, I can try out. And I felt a bit that he saw me maybe as a rival, or how you said, rival. And this feeling was not really, I had to struggle with that because before, when I did my training at this time, I felt confident, I had good relationships with people, but there I had to struggle with this feeling of he maybe sees me as a rival. And I also had the feeling that he did more things with my twin brother. So he was more hanging out with him or more doing fun with him and not with me. Yeah, I had to struggle with that feeling. And in general, right, because I had this development, I did a lot of meditation. Other people were sometimes like a bit like, oh, what is going on with him? And after a while, it flowed away, but I had often struggled to deal with that. And I think if I come home, and now I also will have this development after a while, how I can deal with the situations better. Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody sees you as a rival, that doesn't mean you need to see them as a rival, right? Because they're having certain cravings in their mind, they're having certain hatred or anger, and they're having the jealousy that is arising. And this is all coming from their ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, that third poison that we talk about, that third unwholesome root. So just because somebody else has anger and hatred towards you doesn't mean you have to have it towards them, or they see you as a competition that you need to see them that way. So you can eliminate any kind of craving, desire, attachment to be in this competition with them and just see them as an equal. And however they see you is how they choose to see you. But if you eliminate your cravings, then you don't have to have any feelings about them being a rival or something like that.
Or I can feel not this stress or this through letting go, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to ask you. So what causes stress?
Craving,
desire, attachment, right? And how do you eliminate craving, desire, attachment?
Meditation and cutting off and letting go of sensations and so on.
Right. Breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. That's how you train your mind to let go. But more fully, it's the entire Eightfold Path. So whenever you notice discontentedness rising up, you cut that off and cut that off and cut that off. And all the while, you're training your mind with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, and all the other steps of the Eightfold Path. And then you just need to accumulate enough of these benefits. You're going to need to be in some of these situations. You can't just, go off to a cave, train your mind, and then come back and you're enlightened. Sometimes people think that's the way that enlightenment works, that you go off into a cave for 10 years, you train your mind, and you come back into the society and you're enlightened. This isn't actually how it works. The Buddha did go to the forest for 6 years, and that's where he spent time to train his mind. Actually, it was 4 years that he was in the forest, but he came in contact with people every single day because he needed to have food, and that's how he got food. So if you went into the cave for 10 years and you trained your mind and you were quite peaceful in the cave, as soon as you came out and you started interacting with people, you'd be upset, you'd be angry. Your mind's not enlightened at that point. So you need to develop this Eightfold Path and get your practice up to consistently practicing it. And then you're going to need to experience enough of these situations where you're with your older brother and he is being competitive and hostile or bitter or whatever it is that he's doing, seeing you as a rival, and you're not allowing your mind to do that, and you're cutting off and cutting off and cutting off. So that's what's going to ultimately transform your mind and transform your relationships, is putting the mind in these situations, but now doing it with the wisdom of these teachings, where before you didn't really have a frame of reference of how to handle this situation, where now you're learning the wisdom of how to handle it. Anything else? Yep.
My question is, do you share this teaching with your son? I have 2 children. So I think as a mother, I don't have expectation, but I do want to share some great teachings with my children, especially I think that's true wisdom. So any advice on that?
Yeah, we have a whole class as part of this course where I'm going to teach you how to share the teachings with children, because the answer is yes, I do teach my son. I started formally teaching him when he was 6, but we were actually doing things with him even when he was in the womb. My wife was meditating, and then even when they came out as an infant, there's things that you can be doing even in their infancy to help them train their mind to cut things off and let it go. Well, I'll teach you when I get to that class, but there's certain things you can be doing, and I'll teach it to you. Okay, let me see online if we have any questions.
Can I ask
we have a question
too?
here? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm Paul. Nice to meet you. I have a problem for me, like if I get in a serious relationship and it getting more serious, I develop a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like kind of I want to run away, and I couldn't deal with that until now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So have you been in relationships in the past that when they broke up, you felt pretty painful feelings?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So if you've experienced situations in the past where you had relationships and then when they were over, you experienced painful feelings as a result,
Yeah.
I think you're starting to understand that what's causing those painful feelings is the craving, desire, attachment, the wanting this relationship to be permanent. It's not the love that's causing those painful feelings. It's the mind holding on. And now when you've had that experience where there's been a painful experience in the past, now when you're in this new relationship, the mind gets this fear that, oh my goodness, when this is over, it's going to hurt. And I'm not interested in feeling that hurt. And the mind thinks, with its lack of wisdom, the way to solve this problem is to push it away. And if I push it away, if I run away from the relationship, then that's going to solve the problem and I won't experience this pain. So there's certain conditioning of the mind, these certain cravings that the mind just lacks wisdom and doesn't realize that what's causing the fear, what's causing those painful feelings in the relationship is the cravings, the desires, the attachments. So when you learn how to create relationships where there's no cravings, desires, attachments, and as you heard with a life partner, it's impossible if you're going to be having sex to be able to do that, but you can get to a point where at least there's some minimal amount of craving, desire, attachment so that you can have a wonderful relationship together. But in other relationships, like with your Buddhist teacher, sometimes this is the very first relationship where you've ever had where there hasn't been attachment. Like, I don't want anything from you.
Yeah.
I don't expect anything from you. And you can see what that feels like, where I love you as you are. Whatever you do, I just love you. I have no expectations of you. So then when you start experiencing that with a relationship with your Buddhist teacher, now you start learning how to replicate that in your life and start experiencing relationships where there's no craving, desire, attachment. But in a life partnership or a boyfriend-girlfriend type of relationship, there's going to be attachment. And if you guys break up, you're going to have some painful feelings. So that's why it's so wise to take your time in the learning process and learn this person and make sure you make a wise decision and now build a life together. So this fear that you're having, it's from the craving, wanting this relationship to be a certain way or wanting it to be permanent. And now there's this fear in some aspect of the relationship. So you need to eliminate your craving, whatever that is. And I've taught you Monday about the Eightfold Path, and I taught you yesterday how to identify your cravings. So you need to be able to figure out what is the exact craving and train your mind to let it go. And if the craving is the relationship itself, then that's what I'm going to teach you after lunch, of how to eliminate attachment to the people that are close to you. So anytime you're having any discontentedness, it's always craving, desire, attachment. And the solution is always breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, as well as all the steps on the Eightfold Path, and then accumulating enough of those benefits to be able to train your mind to let go. And then doing the other things to identify your cravings, like we talked about yesterday, and creating the plan in order to surgically remove these cravings. And part of that is what I'm going to teach you this afternoon, is showing you how to eliminate attachment to your life partner, to your parents, to your children, to people like this.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you help me define mental discipline and verify whether the way I'm thinking about it is correct?
Sure. So what mental... Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can I have a go at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I'm thinking it is that it's the ability to cut off the cravings, desires, and attachments. And I'm starting to feel like it's the ability, the skill, and perhaps how quickly those pollutions of the mind can be cut off, almost to a point of like not even being started. Is that how you would define mental discipline?
Yeah, that's a real detailed description of it. At a high level, mental discipline is being able to control the mind and have calmness and composure at all times. That's at a high level. But at a detailed level, the way that you get to that is what you described, is being able to notice when discontent feelings are arising. That's your mindfulness. And now being able to apply right effort to cut it off and let it go. right? And then you're going to have focus and you're going to have concentration and clarity because you've eliminated these pollutions. You're going to get more and more discipline and control of the mind. But as long as those pollutions are in the mind, you're not going to have control and discipline of the mind. So what you talked about is like the action of how do you get to that discipline and then being able to control the mind. But at a high level, it's maintaining your calmness and composure in all situations. Because when you're angry and sad and frustrated and all those other, even jealousy and boredom and loneliness and things like that, you don't have control over your mind in that situation. So the only person that's going to have complete control of their mind is an enlightened being. But in the journey to enlightenment, you'll be able to develop more and more discipline and more control of the mind.
And then I guess once the mind has eradicated the cravings, desires, attachments, is the next step, maybe even under this umbrella of mental discipline, to have the discipline to act with wisdom?
Yes.
Right? Like, is that, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't naturally flow out without having the right action.
Yeah, you should always be trying to work to function through wisdom, because that's what's going to produce wholesome results in your life. And that's why the mental discipline is so important, because when you have control of your mind and you can maintain your calmness and composure, you'll be able to get to your wisdom. But if you don't have control over your mind, if your mind's angry and sad and bored and lonely and fearful and all these other things, you don't have control over your mind at that point and you can't access your wisdom. So that's why it's so important to stay diligent and dedicated to your meditation, to your generosity, to all those other steps on the Eightfold Path, so you can maintain your calmness and composure. And then this is what's going to allow you to access your wisdom, make wise decisions, and produce wholesome results in your life. So one of the key phrases that the Buddha says is, he says, meditate, monks, do not be complacent, lest you will regret it later. So in that situation where your mind's all shaken up and you're starting to make unwise decisions and it's starting to produce unwholesome results, you're going to regret having not meditated. So you would like to train your mind to be disciplined through meditation and all these other teachings, so that then you can operate through wisdom. And that's where you see significant improvements in your life, because more and more you can control your mind, more and more you're making wise decisions. You heard me talk about putting fresh water in the garden hose. Do you remember that analogy? The more fresh water you can put in the garden hose, the more you're flushing out this mud out of the garden hose. And next thing you know, you've got nothing but clean water coming out of the garden hose. So when you can maintain your calmness and composure, controlling your mind with discipline, you can keep putting fresh water into your garden hose because you're operating through wisdom.
What's the cause of perhaps people not taking the right action, or maybe not having the motivation to take action or do what's right, or that sort of idea?
It's the lack of wisdom, the ignorance or unknowing of true reality, that confusion, that third poison that we talk about, that third unwholesome root. That's the reason why we do what we do when we're making unwise decisions. So you could intellectually know, for example, that it's unwise to lie, but because of the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, it can't practice this, and it decides to lie because of its lack of wisdom. And there's some craving in there that if I tell the truth, I'm not going to get what I want. I want this thing, so let me lie in order to get what I want. So because of ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, craving continues to exist in the mind. And then as long as there's craving, there's going to be anger, because in some cases you're going to get what you want, in some cases you aren't. So the ultimate cause of all the problems and all the struggles in one's own mind and the entire world is what we typically refer to as ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. The word ignorance is like a derogatory word. That's why I don't really use it, but other people use it. So it's more about confusion or misunderstanding, a lack of wisdom. You can trace every single issue back to that. So that's why the number one priority in the teachings of the Buddha is to cultivate wisdom, so that you can see the truth of true reality of what the natural laws are, because then you'll operate through those natural laws. Just like we operate through the natural law of gravity and we make wiser decisions because of it, the same thing is true. When you understand these natural laws that the Buddha taught, you're going to operate more wisely through those. But you can't do that if your mind's shaken up. So that's why he's teaching you to eradicate the pollutions of the mind, so your mind can function more optimally, making wiser decisions that are going to produce wholesome results in your life.
To summarize, I feel like nowadays there's a lot of lack of motivation that's out there to do things. Or my friend's daughter, who's just like started university, just is having problems doing things, like just kind of getting moving, right? And so are we saying that, I guess that stems from both the pollutions of the mind kind of being pulled in multiple directions from cravings, desires, attachments, and also the fact that there's just lack of wisdom, there's ignorance, there's maybe confusion, delusion, those sorts of things that then in the end is just kind of causing her to not act.
Yeah. So
Right.
because of the ignorance or unknowing of true reality, the mind doesn't understand the natural laws of existence. It doesn't understand this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. And because of the mind's cravings, this individual is craving to do other things other than study, other than going to class. They have other things that are pulling them in other directions within their own mind. And now when they're spending time and effort doing those things and not studying, then they're experiencing the consequences of bad grades, for example, or struggling. And this is because of the pollutions of the mind. It's the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality of these natural laws of the cause and effect of things like natural law of karma that one allows their cravings to continue to exist in their mind. And now they're choosing to go over here and do these other things rather than study. So that's like from a high level. And then when you get down into the details of it, the Buddha teaches things like the enlightenment factor of energy, where you practice having ambition and motivation and encouragement, and you understand that this is what you need in life in order to be successful. You're going to need ambition and motivation and enthusiasm. And you also learn in something called the 5 hindrances. You learn that complacency is going to hinder you from experiencing better results in your life, like dullness, lethargic condition. And these are things that she doesn't know. Your friend's daughter doesn't know these things. She doesn't understand the natural laws of existence. She doesn't understand the 7 factors of enlightenment, that she needs to arise this enlightenment factor of energy where she has ambition and motivation and encouragement. And she doesn't understand she's being plagued by this complacency, by this dullness and this lethargic condition. So because of her lack of wisdom, her cravings are just running rampant in her mind and taking her in another direction. And the result is, I've got bad grades, or I can't perform well in college. But if she arose wisdom and she trained her mind and she got rid of these cravings and she started practicing the teachings, then her mind would be performing optimally and she could be very successful at what she's doing. But because people's unknowing of true reality, they don't even know these teachings exist. They don't even know what they're all about. Some people call them a religion. Some people think that it's rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. They don't understand that there's this whole path of learning that the Buddha taught, which is this better way of life. Then people just don't know. They just don't know what they don't know. That's what the ignorance is, the unknowing of true reality, where the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So you've got all these beings in the world just struggling, functioning through craving, anger, and ignorance on an individual level, but even at global level. Like if you take a war, like a global conflict, it's all based on craving, anger, and ignorance. And you can trace it back because it's just one president or prime minister in one country and another one, there's craving, anger, and ignorance, and now there's a war. Give me that land. I want that land. No, I'm not going to give you that land. Oh, really? I'm going to fear you into give me that land. I'm going to send my soldiers over there to kill your people. This is craving, right? This is a longing, a yearning. And now my anger arises, and I think you're the one who's causing it. And I think the way to solve that is to get the objects of my affection. And I'm going to send soldiers in there to kill and murder and destroy until you give me what I want. And this craving and anger, where is it all coming from? The ignorance and the unknowing of true reality. So the way to get to harmony in the world is if each person chose to train their mind and get rid of craving, anger, and ignorance, the world will become a completely peaceful place. It'd be like heaven on earth. But people just don't know.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it looks like it's lunchtime. Oh, it's really lunchtime. It's 12:45. All right. So when we come back from lunch, I've got this topic of practicing non-attachment, how to eliminate attachment to those who are closest to you, because some of the challenging relationships that you have are your friends, your family, your life partners, your children, things like this. And as long as you're attached to people, you're going to struggle in your relationship. So in terms of creating harmonious relationships, you're going to need to eliminate these attachments in your relationships. But eliminating attachment doesn't mean that you eliminate the relationship. It means you need to eliminate it with it's in your own mind. So I'm going to teach you how to do that after lunch. So just looking at the time, would you guys be okay with an hour and 15-minute lunch break? Coming back at 2? You guys okay? Okay. So I'll see you guys at 2 o'clock. Okay? Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/supportbuddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.